The mess hall at Fort Bragg buzzed with the usual chatter of soldiers grabbing their evening meal. Sergeant Marcus Chen sat alone at a corner table, methodically eating his dinner while reading a tactical manual. His sleeve was rolled up slightly, revealing the edge of a simple black tattoo on his forearm. "Hey, check out the new guy," whispered Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison to his Delta Force teammates. Morrison had the kind of swagger that came from surviving missions most people would only see in movies. His eyes were sharp, always scanning, always judging. "Look at that ink he's got." The 3 Delta operatives had just returned from a classified operation in Eastern Europe. They were still riding the high that came after a successful mission, that feeling of being untouchable. In their world, they were the elite among the elite. Every other soldier was just playing army. "What is that, some kind of Boy Scout badge?" laughed Corporal Danny Reeves, craning his neck to get a better look. The tattoo appeared to be nothing more than a simple geometric pattern, 3 interlocking circles with a small star in the center. "Probably got it at some strip mall parlor," added Sergeant First Class Tom Bradley, the oldest of the 3. "These regular army guys and their cute little tattoos. Bet he thinks it makes him look tough." Their voices carried just enough for other soldiers to hear. A few heads turned their way, some looking uncomfortable with the obvious mockery, but nobody said anything. Delta Force had a reputation, and challenging them wasn't something most people were eager to do. Marcus continued eating, seemingly oblivious to their comments. He had learned long ago that responding to such taunts only made things worse. Besides, these men had no idea what his tattoo really meant. How could they? The truth had been buried deeper than most state secrets. Morrison stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Come on, let's go have a friendly chat with our decorated friend here." The 3 men approached Marcus's table with the kind of casual confidence that suggested they owned every room they entered. Morrison slid into the seat across from Marcus, while the other 2 flanked him on either side. "Mind if we sit?" Morrison asked, though he was already settled in. "Couldn't help but notice your artwork there, soldier. That's some real artistic stuff you got going on." Marcus looked up from his book, his dark eyes meeting Morrison's without a hint of challenge or fear. "Gentlemen," he said simply, then returned to his reading. "Oh, we're being formal now?" Reeves chuckled. "What's your story, Chen? Let me guess, you're one of those honor guard guys, right? Stand around in dress uniform, march in pretty formations?" "Something like that," Marcus replied, not looking up. Bradley leaned in closer, trying to get a better view of the tattoo. "Seriously, though, what's with the geometry lesson on your arm? Some kind of religious thing? Mathematical equation? Or did you just let the tattoo artist doodle whatever he wanted?" "It's just a tattoo," Marcus said quietly. "Just a tattoo," Morrison repeated mockingly. "Come on, soldier. Everything means something in this business. You don't get ink unless it represents something important to you. So what's the story? What unit were you with?" For the first time, Marcus closed his book and gave them his full attention. There was something in his eyes now. Not anger or irritation, but a kind of weariness that seemed too old for his young face. "3rd Honor Guard," he said simply. The Delta operatives exchanged glances. They had never heard of any 3rd Honor Guard unit. "3rd Honor Guard," Morrison repeated slowly. "Let me guess, you guys guard the 3rd entrance to the Pentagon. Or maybe you're the 3rd shift at Arlington Cemetery." "Something like that," Marcus said again, reopening his book. The mockery continued for several more minutes. The Delta operatives were clearly enjoying themselves, having found what they thought was an easy target. Other soldiers in the mess hall tried to ignore the scene, but the discomfort was obvious. This kind of hazing happened sometimes, but it never felt right to watch. Marcus endured it all with the same quiet patience he had shown from the beginning. He answered their questions with minimal responses, never rising to their bait, never showing anger or embarrassment. If anything, his calm demeanor seemed to annoy them more than if he had fought back. "Well, this has been fun," Morrison finally said, standing up. "Enjoy your coloring book there, Chen. Try not to get any more participation trophy tattoos, okay?" The 3 men were just beginning to walk away when the mess hall doors opened with unusual force. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed across the room, and conversations began to die down. Someone important was coming in. General Patricia Hawkins entered the mess hall like a force of nature. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she carried herself with the kind of authority that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. Her graying hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her uniform was immaculate. More importantly, the stars on her collar indicated she was a 3-star general, someone who could end careers with a phone call. "As you were," she said quietly, but her voice carried across the entire room. Most soldiers relaxed slightly but remained alert. Generals didn't usually visit mess halls unless something important was happening. General Hawkins moved through the room with purpose, nodding to various soldiers as she passed. Her aide, a nervous-looking captain, followed a few steps behind, occasionally checking his tablet. The Delta operatives had frozen in place when she entered. They were used to being the predators in any room, but generals were a different kind of dangerous entirely. They watched as she made her way across the mess hall, clearly heading somewhere specific. Marcus had noticed the general's entrance, but unlike everyone else, he seemed to shrink slightly in his seat. He quickly rolled down his sleeve, covering the tattoo completely, but it was too late. General Hawkins had spotted him. The mess hall had gone completely silent. Every soldier watched as General Hawkins changed direction and walked directly toward Marcus's table. Her expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity in her step that suggested this was not a casual encounter. Morrison and his team stood awkwardly beside the table, unsure whether to leave or stay. You didn't just walk away when a 3-star general was approaching, but you also didn't want to be caught in whatever was about to happen. Marcus slowly stood up as the general approached, his posture snapping to perfect attention despite being in a casual dining environment. There was a protocol to these things even in unexpected situations. "At ease, Sergeant," General Hawkins said softly, but her eyes were fixed on his forearm where the sleeve had ridden up slightly again, revealing just a hint of the tattoo. "Ma'am," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The general stepped closer, and in a movement that shocked everyone watching, she gently took Marcus's arm and pushed up his sleeve to fully reveal the tattoo. The 3 interlocking circles with the star in the center were now clearly visible to everyone nearby. What happened next defied every military protocol the Delta operatives had ever learned. General Patricia Hawkins, a decorated veteran with over 30 years of service, slowly and deliberately came to attention. Then, in a movement that seemed to take forever, she raised her hand in the most respectful salute any of them had ever witnessed. The silence in the mess hall was deafening. Soldiers throughout the room began to notice what was happening, and one by one they too came to attention. Nobody understood what was occurring, but when a general salutes, you pay attention. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then returned the salute with equal precision. His eyes, which had seemed tired and resigned just moments before, now held something else entirely: respect, recognition, and perhaps a deep sadness. The salute lasted nearly 10 seconds, an eternity in military time. When they finally dropped their hands, General Hawkins stepped even closer to Marcus, speaking in a voice so low that only he and the nearby Delta operatives could hear. "3rd Honor Guard," she said simply. "I should have known." "General," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion he was struggling to control. "How many made it back?" she asked. 13 of us, ma'am, out of 200. The general's face seemed to age 10 years in that moment. She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had hoped was not true. Morrison, Bradley, and Reeves stood frozen, their earlier confidence completely evaporated. Whatever they had stumbled into was far beyond their understanding. The easy target they had been mocking suddenly seemed like something else entirely. "These gentlemen were just asking about your service," General Hawkins said, finally acknowledging the Delta operatives. Her tone was polite but carried an undertone that could freeze blood. "I trust they were treating you with the respect you deserve, Sergeant Chen." The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Morrison felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "They were just curious about the tattoo, ma'am," Marcus replied diplomatically. "No harm done." "Curious," the general repeated, her gaze shifting to the 3 operatives. "Gentlemen, are you familiar with the 3rd Honor Guard?" "No, ma'am," Morrison managed to say. "We've never heard of that unit." "Of course you haven't," she said matter-of-factly. "Most people haven't, most people never will." She paused, studying their faces. The 3rd Honor Guard was formed for a very specific purpose during a very specific time. Their service record is classified at the highest levels. Bradley found his voice. "Ma'am, if we caused any offense, Staff Sergeant Bradley, isn't it?" The general interrupted. She seemed to know exactly who they were, which was both impressive and unnerving. Tell me, what do you know about first contact protocols? The question seemed to come from nowhere. First contact, ma'am? With non-terrestrial intelligence, she clarified. What would you do if you encountered beings from another world? Reeves looked confused. Ma'am, are we talking about a hypothetical scenario? General Hawkins smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Sergeant Chen, would you mind showing these gentlemen the rest of your tattoo? Marcus hesitated. General, I'm not sure It's all right, son. They've earned the right to know what they were mocking. With obvious reluctance, Marcus unbuttoned his shirt and pulled it off his left shoulder. The tattoo they had seen was indeed just part of a larger design. The 3 circles with the star were connected to a complex pattern that covered most of his upper arm. But it was the additional elements that made the Delta operative's blood run cold. Wrapped around the geometric pattern were symbols that were clearly not human in origin. They looked almost like writing, but in a script that seemed to bend and flow in ways that hurt to look at directly. And at the center of it all, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, was a small image that could only be described as a spacecraft. Jesus Christ, Reeves whispered, then immediately looked embarrassed for swearing in front of a general. The 3rd Honor Guard, General Hawkins explained, was humanity's first diplomatic corps to an alien species. Sergeant Chen here was part of the most important mission in human history. A mission that officially never happened. Morrison's mind was reeling. Ma'am, are you saying, I'm saying, Staff Sergeant Morrison, that you gentlemen just spent the last 20 minutes mocking a hero whose actions helped prevent the extinction of our species? The general's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. A hero whose friends died so that you could sit in this mess hall and complain about his tattoo. The weight of their mistake was beginning to settle on the 3 operatives. They had encountered classified operations before, had been part of missions that would never appear in any official record. But this was something else entirely. The symbols, Bradley asked quietly. What do they mean? Marcus looked to the general, who nodded permission. Their names, he said simply. The names of my squad mates who didn't come home. Written in the language we learned during our assignment. And the star? Morrison asked, his earlier arrogance completely gone. That represents Earth, Marcus replied. The world we were trying to protect. General Hawkins checked her watch. Gentlemen, I have a briefing to attend. But I think you owe Sergeant Chen an apology. And perhaps if he's willing, he might be able to help you understand what real service looks like. She turned to Marcus. Sergeant, walk with me for a moment. As they moved away from the table, the general's voice dropped to a whisper that only Marcus could hear. We may need you again, son. Sooner than we hoped. Marcus watched the general disappear through the mess hall doors, leaving him alone with 3 Delta Force operatives who now looked at him as if he were radioactive. The easy confidence they had shown earlier was completely gone, replaced by the kind of wariness that came from realizing you had badly misjudged a situation. Sergeant Chen, Morrison began, his voice much more respectful than before. We owe you an apology. We had no idea. You couldn't have known, Marcus interrupted, pulling his shirt back on and rolling down his sleeves. The whole point was for nobody to know. Bradley leaned forward. But we can know now, right? I mean, the general seemed to think. The general has her reasons for everything she does, Marcus said carefully. But yes, I suppose some of it can be shared now. Though I have to warn you, once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. Reeves looked around the mess hall, which was slowly returning to normal as soldiers went back to their meals and conversations. What exactly are we talking about here? How long ago did this happen? Marcus sat back down, gesturing for them to join him. This time there was no mockery in their movements. They sat like students waiting for a lecture that might change their lives. 3 years ago, Marcus began, there was an incident in the Pacific. Officially, it was a meteor impact about 200 miles west of Hawaii. The Navy cordoned off the area, claimed they were investigating possible debris. I remember that, Morrison said. We were on standby for possible search and rescue operations, but they told us it was handled. It was handled, Marcus confirmed. Just not the way you think. The object that came down wasn't a meteor. It was a ship. Alien ship. The 3 operatives exchanged glances. Even after everything they had seen and done, this was difficult to process. The ship was damaged but not destroyed, Marcus continued. When our Navy reached it, they found survivors. 7 beings unlike anything anyone had ever imagined. They were dying, their life support systems failing. What did they look like? Bradley asked quietly. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Imagine something that was almost human, but taller, thinner. Their skin had a translucent quality, like you could see light moving beneath it. And their eyes. He paused. Their eyes were ancient. You looked at them and got the feeling they had seen the birth and death of stars. Jesus, Reeves whispered. The beings were peaceful, Marcus continued. Desperate, really. Their ship had been attacked by something else, something that had been hunting them across space. They had come to Earth not as invaders, but as refugees. Morrison leaned forward. And that's where you came in? The military had protocols for almost everything, but not for this. They needed people who could learn fast, think on their feet, and handle information that could drive most people insane. They also needed people who could be trusted to never speak about what they experienced. How did they choose you? Bradley asked. Psychological profiles mostly. They were looking for soldiers with specific traits. High intelligence, emotional stability, and something they called cognitive flexibility. The ability to accept new realities without breaking down. They screened thousands of candidates and selected 200 of us. Marcus stared at his hands as he spoke. We were taken to a facility that doesn't exist on any map. For 6 weeks, we studied everything the aliens could teach us about their language, their culture, their technology. But most importantly, we learned about what was hunting them. What was hunting them? Reeves asked, though he seemed almost afraid of the answer. They called them the Devourers, Marcus said simply. A species that had been consuming worlds for millions of years. They would arrive at a planet, strip it of all resources, enslaved or destroyed any intelligent life they found, then move on to the next world. The mess hall suddenly felt much smaller and more confining. The beings we rescued were called the Keepers, Marcus continued. They were the last of an alliance of species that had been fighting the Devourers for centuries. They had developed technology that could hide worlds from Devourer detection, but their own world had finally been discovered and destroyed. And they came to Earth because, Morrison prompted. Because Earth was next on the list, Marcus said flatly. The Devourers had already detected our planet. They were coming whether we were ready or not. The Keepers wanted to give us a chance to survive. Bradley rubbed his forehead. So what happened? Obviously, we're all still here. The Keepers had technology that could create a kind of shield around Earth, something that would make us invisible to Devourer sensors, but it required a massive energy source and precise coordination with our existing satellite network. And you guys were part of making that happen? Marcus nodded slowly. We were the interface team. The Keepers couldn't work directly with our technology. Their biology was too different. They needed human operators who could understand their instructions and implement them using our equipment. That doesn't sound too dangerous, Reeves observed. It wasn't supposed to be, Marcus replied bitterly. The plan was simple. We would work with the Keepers to modify our satellite network, activate the shielding system, and hide Earth from the Devourers. The aliens would then leave to find another safe world, and we would go back to our regular lives. But something went wrong, Morrison guessed. Everything went wrong, Marcus confirmed. 3 days into the mission, Devourer scout ships arrived early. They detected the Keeper technology and realized what we were trying to do. Suddenly, we weren't just helping to hide Earth. We were in the middle of an active war zone. Marcus's voice became quieter, more strained. The Devourers landed forces in 12 locations around the world. Small teams, but incredibly advanced. Their mission was to capture or destroy the Keeper technology before we could complete the shielding process. And you fought them? We tried, Marcus said. But we were diplomats and technicians, not warriors. We weren't prepared for combat against an enemy that could phase through walls and had weapons that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. The 3 Delta operatives were completely silent now, hanging on every word. The battle lasted 18 hours, Marcus continued. One by one, our teams were overrun. The Keepers fought alongside us, but they were scientists, not soldiers either. In the end, only one team managed to complete their part of the mission, the team at the primary control station. Your team? Bradley asked softly. Marcus nodded. 13 of us made it to the final station. We activated the shield with less than an hour to spare. Earth disappeared from Devourer sensors just as their main fleet arrived in the outer solar system. So you saved the world, Morrison said. We saved the world, Marcus agreed, but at a cost that still keeps me awake at night. Marcus stared at his coffee cup for a long moment before continuing. The three Delta operatives waited, understanding that whatever came next was the heart of the story, and the source of the pain they could see in his eyes. The final control station was located in an underground facility beneath Mount McKinley in Alaska, Marcus began. It was chosen because of its isolation and the natural shielding the mountain provided. The Keepers needed 47 minutes to complete the shield activation sequence. We had to hold the position for that long no matter what. How many Devourers were coming for you? Morrison asked. Intelligence estimated between 50 and 70 hostiles. They were wrong. 300 Devourer soldiers materialized around the facility at the same time our other teams were being overrun worldwide. Bradley winced. 300 against 13? Plus 4 Keepers who insisted on staying to complete the activation, Marcus corrected. So 17 defenders total against an army that had been perfecting warfare for millions of years. Marcus pulled out a small, worn photograph from his wallet. It showed a group of young soldiers standing together, smiling at the camera. All of them looked impossibly young and optimistic. This was taken the day before the mission, he said, placing the photo on the table where the operatives could see it. 3rd Honor Guard Alpha Team. That's Lieutenant Sarah Kim, our team leader. Next to her is Corporal Mike Rodriguez, our tech specialist. Private Jenny Walsh, Communications. Sergeant Dan Murphy, Explosives Expert. He pointed to each face as he spoke, his voice growing softer with each name. Private Alex Turner, Medic. Corporal Lisa Grant, Sniper. Private Jason Chen, no relation, we just had the same last name. Staff Sergeant Frank Williams, our Demolitions Coordinator. They all look so young, Reeves observed quietly. We were young, Marcus agreed. I was 23. Sarah was the oldest at 28. We thought we were ready for anything. He paused. We were wrong. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, gathering himself to continue. The attack began at 0347 hours. The Devourers didn't announce themselves or demand surrender. They simply appeared inside our perimeter and started killing. How did they get through your defenses? Devourer soldiers can phase shift, Marcus explained. They can become partially incorporeal, allowing them to move through solid matter. Walls, doors, armor, none of it stopped them. They materialized inside our bunkers and started firing energy weapons that could cut through steel like paper. Morrison shook his head. That's impossible to defend against. That's what we thought too, Marcus said. But Lieutenant Kim had studied the Keeper briefings more carefully than the rest of us. She realized that while the Devourers could phase through inanimate objects, they couldn't phase through living tissue. As long as we stayed close together, they couldn't materialize inside our formation. Smart thinking, Bradley acknowledged. It kept us alive for the first 10 minutes. Marcus continued. But it also meant we were trapped in a tight formation while energy blasts were coming at us from every direction. Private Walsh was the first to go. Took a direct hit while trying to maintain communications with command. She was gone before she hit the ground. The photograph seemed to take on a different weight as the Delta operatives looked at it again, knowing these smiling faces represented real people who had died fighting an impossible battle. The Keepers were working frantically to complete the activation sequence, but they needed time we didn't have, Marcus said. Lieutenant Kim made the decision to split our forces. Half would stay to protect the control room, half would move outside to draw the Devourers away. Who went outside? Morrison asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. 8 of us volunteered, Marcus replied. Kim insisted on leading the external team. Said it was her responsibility as team leader. We set up a perimeter around the facility entrance and started making as much noise as possible. Did it work? Too well, Marcus said bitterly. The Devourers took the bait and concentrated their forces on our position. For 20 minutes we held them off using conventional weapons and tactics that shouldn't have worked against an enemy that advanced. But they did work? Barely. The Devourers were used to fighting technologically advanced opponents. They weren't prepared for humans using crude but effective tactics. Sergeant Murphy rigged improvised explosive devices using materials from the facility. Corporal Grant used her sniper rifle to target what looked like command structures in their formation. Marcus's voice grew distant, as if he were seeing the battle again. Private Turner kept us patched up with basic field medicine. Jason Chen and I provided covering fire while the others maneuvered. It was insane, desperate, and it worked longer than it had any right to. What changed? Reeves asked quietly. The Devourers adapted, Marcus said simply. They always do. That's how they've conquered worlds for millions of years. They learn from every encounter and adjust their tactics accordingly. After 20 minutes, they stopped making the same mistakes. He pointed to different faces in the photograph. Sergeant Murphy was overrun while trying to set another explosive. Private Turner was killed trying to reach him. Corporal Grant's position was flanked when they figured out her sight lines. Jesus, Bradley whispered. Lieutenant Kim ordered the survivors to fall back to the facility, but by then there were only 4 of us left from the external team. The Devourers had figured out our movement patterns and were predicting our tactics. Marcus took another sip of coffee, his hand trembling slightly. That's when the miracle happened. Inside the facility, the remaining team members had been working with the Keepers to modify our weapons. They had found a way to disrupt Devourer phase-shifting technology. How? The Keepers had portable energy generators that could create localized electromagnetic fields. When properly calibrated, these fields would force Devourer soldiers into solid form. They couldn't phase through walls anymore, couldn't appear behind our lines. Morrison leaned forward. That must have changed everything. It did, but not soon enough, Marcus replied sadly. We were down to 7 people total, 4 from my external team, 3 from the internal team, plus the 4 Keepers. The Devourers were still coming, but now we could actually hurt them. What about the shield activation? Still needed 14 more minutes, Marcus said. 14 minutes might as well have been 14 hours. We were low on ammunition, exhausted, and facing an enemy that was getting smarter with every attack. But you held them off, Bradley said. We held them off, Marcus confirmed. But the cost? He trailed off, staring at the photograph again. Lieutenant Kim made the final call. He continued after a moment. She ordered Private Jason Chen and me to fall back to the control room to protect the Keepers during the final phase of activation. The other 5 would hold the entrance corridor. And you followed orders? Marcus nodded slowly. We followed orders. We sealed ourselves in the control room with the Keepers and listened to the battle outside. For 14 minutes we heard gunfire, energy weapons, explosions, and screaming. For 14 minutes 5 people held off 300 alien soldiers. The mess hall around them had faded into background noise. The 3 Delta operatives sat in silence, trying to process what they were hearing. When the shield finally activated, Marcus said quietly, everything went silent. The electromagnetic fields that had been keeping the Devourers solid suddenly expanded across the entire planet. Every Devourer soldier on Earth was instantly cut off from their phase-shifting ability. What happened to them? They died, Marcus said simply. All of them. The transition from incorporeal to solid form, while being hit by the planetary field, caused catastrophic molecular failure. 300 aliens just ceased to exist. He looked up at the Delta operatives. And when we opened the control room door, we found that Jason and I were the only human survivors. The silence stretched between them as the weight of Marcus's words settled in. Morrison found himself looking at the photograph again, seeing the faces differently now. These weren't just soldiers who had died in combat. They were people who had sacrificed themselves to save a world that would never know their names. What happened after the shield activated? Bradley finally asked. Marcus carefully placed the photograph back in his wallet. The first thing we noticed was the silence. The battle sounds just stopped. When we opened the control room door, we found corridors full of strange gray dust, all that remained of the Devourer soldiers. And your teammates? Gone, Marcus said quietly. Not even bodies to recover. The energy weapons the Devourers used didn't leave much behind. We found some equipment, a few personal items, but that was all. Reeves shook his head. So you and this Jason Chen were the only survivors from your location? From our location, yes. But there were 11 other survivors from the other facilities around the world. 13 total out of 200. Marcus paused. The Keepers survived too. All 4 of them. They were better protected in the control room. What did the Keepers do after the shield was activated? Morrison asked. They confirmed that Earth was now invisible to Devourer sensors, Marcus replied. The main fleet that had been approaching our solar system searched for 3 days, then moved on. As far as they could tell, Earth had simply vanished. And then the Keepers left. Marcus nodded. They had to. Their ship was repaired enough for one more jump. They said they would try to find other survivor worlds, maybe rebuild the alliance that had fought the Devourers. Before they left, they gave us a way to contact them if we ever needed help. What kind of way? A communication device. Looks like a simple metallic sphere. but it can send messages across interstellar distances instantly. It's kept in a vault somewhere that I'm not authorized to know about. Bradley leaned back in his chair. So Earth is safe now? Earth is hidden, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. The shield makes us invisible to long-range devourer sensors, but if they ever came close enough to our solar system for other reasons, they would detect us immediately. How close would they have to be? Within about 50 astronomical units, roughly the distance from the Sun to Pluto. Morrison did some quick math in his head. That's still pretty far out. Far enough that we would have maybe 6 months warning if they ever showed up, Marcus agreed. But the shield has other limitations too. It requires constant maintenance using technology we barely understand, and it has a power source that won't last forever. How long do we have? The Keepers estimated the shield would remain stable for approximately 50 years, before requiring major repairs or replacement. That gives us about 47 years to figure out how to maintain it ourselves or find another solution. Reeves whistled softly. And in the meantime, nobody knows about any of this. Nobody except the people who need to know, Marcus confirmed. The cover story about meteor impacts was accepted by the public. The few people who might have suspected something were either recruited into the program or had their concerns dismissed as conspiracy theories. What about you survivors? Bradley asked. What happened to the 3rd Honor Guard? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. We were debriefed extensively. Months of interviews, psychological evaluations, medical examinations. The government wanted to understand everything we had experienced, everything we had learned. And then we were given new identities and scattered to different military units around the world. The official story was that we had been transferred to other divisions for operational security reasons. Our families were told we were involved in classified work that required minimal contact. Morrison frowned. They split you up? Complete separation, Marcus confirmed. We were forbidden from contacting each other or discussing our shared experiences with anyone. The theory was that keeping us isolated would reduce the risk of information leaking out. That seems cruel, Reeves observed. It was necessary, Marcus said, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely agree. 13 people sharing the same impossible memories could be a security risk. 13 people scattered across different units appearing to be normal soldiers was much safer. But you all got the same tattoo? Marcus smiled sadly. That wasn't authorized. Jason Chen came up with the design about 6 months after our reassignment. He managed to get messages to the other survivors through unofficial channels. One by one, we all got the tattoo as a way of honoring the people who didn't make it back. The interlocking circles represent the 13 survivors? Bradley guessed. The 13 survivors plus the 4 keepers who made it possible, Marcus corrected. 17 circles total, though they're arranged in a pattern that makes it look like only 3, unless you know what you're looking for. And the alien writing? The names of our fallen teammates written in the Keeper language. It was the only way we could create a memorial that wouldn't be recognized by anyone who wasn't supposed to know about the mission. Morrison studied Marcus's face. Do you regret it? Getting the tattoo, I mean. It obviously marks you as part of something classified. Every day, Marcus admitted, but I regret not having it more. These people died saving the world, and the world will never know they existed. The tattoo is the only memorial they'll ever have. What about Jason Chen? Where is he now? Marcus's expression darkened. Jason didn't handle the isolation well. About 18 months after our reassignment, he started showing signs of severe PTSD. Nightmares, flashbacks, paranoia. He became convinced that the government was planning to eliminate the survivors to protect the secret. Was he right? No, Marcus said firmly. At least I don't think so. But Jason couldn't be convinced. He went AWOL about 2 years ago. Nobody's seen him since. The other survivors? I don't know, Marcus admitted. We're not supposed to have contact with each other, remember? For all I know, they could be stationed at bases around the world, living normal military lives and pretending none of this ever happened. Reeves looked troubled. That doesn't seem sustainable long term. It's not, Marcus agreed. Which is why General Hawkins is worried. She's been monitoring the situation, and she thinks some of us are starting to crack under the pressure. Is that why she recognized your tattoo so quickly? Morrison asked. Marcus nodded. General Hawkins was the military liaison during our mission. She was one of the few people outside our unit who knew what we were really doing. She's been keeping track of the survivors ever since. Making sure we're psychologically stable and operationally secure. And are you? Psychologically stable, I mean. Marcus considered the question carefully. Most days, yes. I've learned to live with what we experienced. But there are nights when I wake up hearing Lieutenant Kim's voice giving orders, or Sergeant Murphy's laugh, or the sound of Devourer energy weapons. He looked at each of the Delta operatives in turn. You asked earlier if I regret my service. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that good people died. I regret that the world doesn't know how close we came to extinction. But I don't regret doing my duty, even though nobody will ever know. Especially because nobody will ever know, Marcus replied. The fact that people can sit in this mess hall and complain about military food instead of being enslaved by alien conquerors means we did our job. Bradley was quiet for a moment, then asked, Is it over? I mean, are we safe now? Marcus shook his head slowly. General Hawkins doesn't think so. She mentioned that we might be needed again soon. I think something has changed. Something that makes our experience relevant again. What kind of something? I don't know, Marcus admitted. But when a 3-star general tracks down a scattered survivor of a classified alien contact mission and tells him he might be needed soon, it usually means the situation is about to get very complicated very quickly. The next morning, Marcus was awakened by a sharp knock on his barracks door. He glanced at his watch, 05:30 hours earlier than his usual wake-up time. Through the small window, he could see it was still dark outside. Sergeant Chen, came a voice from the hallway. General Hawkins requests your immediate presence in Conference Room Alpha. Marcus dressed quickly and made his way across the base. Conference Room Alpha was used for classified briefings, the kind where cell phones were confiscated and security clearances were verified at the door. As he approached, he was surprised to see Morrison, Bradley, and Reeves waiting outside. Gentlemen, he said quietly, I didn't expect to see you here. Makes 2 of us, Morrison replied. We got called in about 20 minutes ago. Nobody would tell us why. The door opened and General Hawkins appeared. Please come in, all of you. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. The conference room was larger than Marcus had expected, with a long table surrounded by chairs and multiple screens mounted on the walls. Several other officers were already present, including a colonel he didn't recognize and a civilian who had the look of someone from an intelligence agency. Please, sit, General Hawkins said, gesturing to chairs near the head of the table. Before we begin, I need to confirm that everyone in this room has been read into the 3rd Honor Guard program. She looked at the 3 Delta operatives. Gentlemen, based on yesterday's conversation, I'm authorizing your inclusion in this briefing. You'll need to sign additional security agreements after we're finished. Morrison nodded. Understood, ma'am. General Hawkins moved to the front of the room and activated one of the wall screens. It showed what appeared to be a star map with various colored dots and trajectory lines. At 0347 hours this morning, Greenwich Mean Time, our deep space monitoring stations detected something troubling, she began. Sergeant Chen, you'll recognize the significance immediately. The screen zoomed in on a section of the star map showing the outer edge of the solar system. A cluster of red dots was moving in formation toward the inner planets. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Devourer ships? We believe so, the general confirmed. 7 vessels, moving at approximately 60% of light speed. Current trajectory puts them at the edge of Pluto's orbit in approximately 5 days. Bradley leaned forward. But I thought the planetary shield made us invisible to them. It does, General Hawkins replied. Which means either the shield has failed or they're here for a different reason. The civilian spoke up for the first time. Mr. Richardson, NSA, he introduced himself. We've been monitoring all electromagnetic signatures associated with the planetary defense grid. The shield is operating at full capacity with no detectable malfunctions. Then why are they coming? Reeves asked. General Hawkins changed the screen to show a different image, what appeared to be a metallic sphere sitting on a laboratory table. Marcus recognized it immediately. The Keeper communication device, he said. Activated automatically 12 hours ago, the general confirmed. The message it received was brief but clear. A Keeper survivor ship is approaching our solar system, being pursued by Devourer forces. Marcus closed his eyes, understanding immediately. The Keepers who left Earth 3 years ago. They're coming back. That's our assessment, General Hawkins agreed. And they're bringing trouble with them. Morrison was studying the star map. 7 ships doesn't seem like a huge threat, especially if they're just pursuing one refugee vessel. You're thinking like a human soldier, the general replied. Devourer tactics are different. These 7 ships aren't an invasion force. They're scouts and hunters. Their job is to track down the Keeper ship and eliminate it before it can warn other worlds about Devourer movements. But once they get close enough to our solar system, Marcus began, they'll detect Earth. Despite the shield, the general finished. The shield makes us invisible from long range, but at close proximity our electromagnetic signature is unmistakable. Richardson pulled up another screen showing orbital mechanics calculations. Current projections show the Keeper ship will reach Earth orbit in 4 days. The pursuing Devourer forces will arrive approximately 18 hours later. What's the plan? Bradley asked. General Hawkins looked directly at Marcus. That depends partly on you, Sergeant. You're the only person on this base who has direct experience with both Keeper and Devourer technology. We need to know if there's a way to help the Keeper ship without exposing Earth to the pursuit force. Marcus thought carefully before answering. The Keepers mentioned something during our original mission about emergency protocols. If their ship is in immediate danger, they can transmit their entire database to a nearby receiver and then self-destruct to prevent capture. What kind of database? Everything, Marcus said simply. Their entire accumulated knowledge about Devourer tactics, technology, and weaknesses, plus information about other worlds that might still be fighting the war. Morrison whistled softly. That could be valuable intel. More than valuable, General Hawkins agreed. It could be the key to developing better defenses or even finding a way to take the fight to the Devourers instead of just hiding from them. But there's a problem, Marcus continued. Receiving that transmission would require shutting down the planetary shield temporarily. Earth would be visible to the Devourer ships for however long the download takes. How long? With our current technology, probably 6 to 8 hours. With the improvements we've made since the original mission, maybe 4 hours if we're lucky. Reeves looked skeptical. 4 hours doesn't sound too bad. 4 hours is an eternity in space combat, General Hawkins corrected. The moment our shield drops, every Devourer ship in the system will know exactly where we are. They'll change course immediately and head for Earth at maximum speed. Richardson brought up another set of calculations. If they alter course the moment we become visible, they could reach Earth orbit approximately 14 hours before their original timeline, cutting our preparation time in half, the general observed. Marcus studied the displays, his mind working through the tactical implications. There might be another option. During our original mission, the Keepers mentioned something about selective shield modifications. Instead of dropping the entire planetary defense grid, we might be able to create a localized gap, just enough to receive the transmission without making the whole planet visible. Would that work? In theory, but it would require someone with direct experience modifying Keeper technology, someone who understands how their systems interface with our satellite network. General Hawkins leaned back in her chair, someone like a surviving member of the 3rd Honor Guard. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. But there's another problem. The modifications would have to be made from the original control facility on Mount McKinley. The primary systems are hardwired there and can't be accessed remotely. The same facility where your team made their last stand? Marcus nodded grimly. The same place where 15 people died to activate the shield in the first place. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. They were talking about sending people back to a location that had been the site of humanity's most desperate battle against an alien invasion. There's something else, Richardson said quietly. Our satellite surveillance of the McKinley facility shows unusual activity over the past 72 hours. The screen changed to show aerial reconnaissance photos of a snowy mountain landscape. At first glance, it looked completely normal, but Marcus could see what had caught the analyst's attention. Footprints in the snow, he observed, leading to and from the facility entrance. Human footprints, Richardson confirmed. Someone has been accessing the facility without authorization. General Hawkins looked at Marcus. Any idea who that might be? Marcus stared at the photographs, a sick feeling growing in his stomach. Jason Chen. He's been missing for 2 years, but he would know how to access the facility. And if he's been monitoring communications, he would know about the approaching ships, the general finished. What would he want with the facility? Morrison asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Jason was our team's technical specialist. He understood the Keeper technology better than any of us. If he's having psychological problems and thinks the government is trying to eliminate the survivors, he might try to contact the Keepers himself, Bradley guessed. Or worse, Marcus said grimly. He might try to shut down the planetary shield entirely, force a confrontation between Earth and the Devourers. General Hawkins stood up. Gentlemen, we have a new mission. We need to reach the McKinley facility, secure it from possible sabotage, and prepare for the Keeper ship's arrival. Sergeant Chen, I'm reactivating your 3rd Honor Guard commission. You'll be leading a joint task force. Ma'am, Marcus said carefully, I should point out that I've been out of the program for 3 years. There might be better qualified personnel. There are no better qualified personnel, the general interrupted. You're the only surviving member of the 3rd Honor Guard who's currently stable and available. The others are either missing, like Chen, or stationed in locations where we can't reach them in time. She turned to the Delta operatives. Gentlemen, your experience and skills make you ideal for this mission. You'll be providing security and tact support while Sergeant Chen handles the technical aspects. Morrison looked around the room. What's the timeline? You deploy in 6 hours, General Hawkins replied. The Keeper ship will be within communication range in 3 days. We need the facility secured and the modifications completed before then. And if we can't? Reeves asked. The helicopter touched down on the frozen landing pad near Mount McKinley's base camp at 13:47 hours, 3 days later. Marcus checked his equipment one final time as the rotors wound down. The past 72 hours had been a blur of preparation. Briefings and equipment modifications. Radio check. Morrison's voice came through their encrypted communication system. Lima Charlie. Bradley responded using military terminology for loud and clear. Same here. Reeves confirmed. Copy all, Marcus added. Remember, once we're inside the facility, conventional communications might not work. The Keeper technology creates electromagnetic interference that can disrupt standard radio frequencies. The 4 men disembarked from the helicopter and began the trek toward the hidden facility entrance. The mountain looked exactly as Marcus remembered it, imposing, isolated, and somehow ominous against the gray Alaska sky. How much further? Morrison asked as they climbed through knee-deep snow. About half a mile, Marcus replied, checking his GPS unit. The entrance is camouflaged to look like a natural cave opening. As they approached the coordinates, Marcus held up his hand, signaling the team to stop. Something was wrong. The snow around the facility entrance showed clear signs of recent activity. Not just footprints, but equipment tracks and what looked like supply caches. He's been busy, Bradley observed quietly. Marcus knelt and examined the tracks more closely. These are fresh, less than 12 hours old. He looked up at the team. Jason's definitely here, and he's not just visiting. He's been setting up for something. What kind of something? Reeves asked. Before Marcus could answer, a voice echoed from the direction of the cave entrance. I was wondering when they'd send you. Jason Chen emerged from the shadows, looking much older than the 25 years Marcus knew him to be. His hair was longer, his face was gaunt, and his eyes had the haunted look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well for a very long time. More importantly, he was carrying a modified Keeper energy weapon. Hello, Marcus, Jason said calmly. And hello to our new friends from Delta Force. I've been monitoring your communications since you left Fort Bragg. Morrison's hand moved toward his sidearm, but Marcus shook his head slightly. Jason was clearly unstable, but he was also a highly trained soldier with superior firepower. Jason, Marcus said carefully, we need to talk. There are things happening that you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Jason replied. The Keepers are coming back, bringing Devourers with them. The government wants to risk exposing Earth to get their hands on alien technology. Same old story. Politicians making decisions that soldiers have to live with. That's not what this is about, Marcus said. The intelligence they're carrying could help us defend ourselves. Could help us protect other worlds, Jason laughed bitterly. Protect other worlds? Marcus, we can barely protect our own world. Do you know what I've been doing for the past 2 years? I've been studying the Keeper technology we have access to. I've been learning how their systems really work. And what did you learn? I learned that the planetary shield isn't as stable as they told us, Jason said. The power source is degrading faster than their original estimates. We have maybe 20 years before it fails completely, not 47. Marcus felt his heart sink. 20 years? Maybe less, Jason confirmed. And I learned something else. The shield doesn't just hide us from Devourer sensors, it prevents us from developing certain types of technology. As long as the shield is active, humanity will never advance beyond our current level of space travel and energy generation. Morrison stepped forward slightly. So what are you proposing? I'm proposing we take control of our own destiny, Jason replied. The Keeper ship is carrying complete technical specifications for their technology. If we can get that information and combine it with what I've learned about our own systems, we can build better defenses, real defenses. By dropping the shield and exposing Earth to the Devourer fleet, by using the Devourer fleet as a test, Jason said. 7 ships is manageable if we have the right technology. We take them out, reverse engineer their systems, and use that knowledge to hunt down the rest of them. Bradley shook his head. That's insane. You're talking about risking the entire planet on an untested theory. I'm talking about ending this war instead of hiding from it, Jason shot back. How long do you think we can keep running? How long before the Devourers find us anyway? Marcus studied his former teammate carefully. The logic was sound, even if the conclusions were extreme. Jason, I understand what you're thinking, but there has to be another way. There is another way, Jason said. Help me modify the shield generators. Instead of creating a gap to receive the Keeper transmission, we redirect the entire system to create an offensive weapon. Turn our planetary defense grid into a massive energy cannon. Has that ever been tested? The theory is solid, Jason insisted. The Keeper technology is essentially weaponized electromagnetic manipulation. If we can scale it up and focus it properly, we can destroy the Devourer ships before they get close enough to threaten Earth. Reeves looked skeptical. And if the theory is wrong? Then we die fighting instead of hiding, Jason said simply. At least our children will know we tried. Marcus made his decision. Show me. Marcus, Morrison warned. We have orders. Show me, Marcus repeated, looking directly at Jason. If you're right, if this can work, then maybe it's worth the risk. But I need to see the calculations, understand the technical requirements. Jason hesitated, then nodded toward the cave entrance. Everything's set up inside. I've been working on this for months. The team followed Jason into the facility, weapons ready but not aimed. The interior had been significantly modified since Marcus's last visit. Keeper technology was integrated throughout the control systems, and additional equipment had been installed in configurations Marcus didn't recognize. Impressive, Marcus admitted as they reached the main control room. You've been busy. I've had plenty of time to think, Jason replied. He activated a series of displays showing complex technical schematics. Look at this. The shield generators can be reconfigured to create focused energy beams with approximately 40 times the power output of standard Devourer weapons. Marcus studied the displays carefully. The math seemed correct, but there were variables he couldn't account for. What's the range? Effective targeting out to about 6 astronomical units. More than enough to engage the Devourer ships before they can detect Earth. And the power requirements? That's the beautiful part, Jason said, his enthusiasm growing. The system is already designed to channel massive amounts of energy. We just need to redirect the flow and modify the output arrays. Morrison had been listening to the technical discussion with growing unease. What happens if this doesn't work? What happens if we fire this thing and miss, or if it doesn't destroy all the ships? Then we're in exactly the same situation we'd be in if we tried the original plan, Jason replied. Exposed to Devourer forces with limited defenses. Except with the original plan, we'd have Keeper intelligence to help us, Bradley pointed out. We'll have that too, Jason said. The Keeper ship can transmit their data before we engage the Devourers. We get the intelligence and take out the pursuit force. Marcus was running through the calculations in his head. The timing would have to be perfect. We'd need to receive the Keeper transmission, modify the shield generators, and fire the weapon all within a very narrow window. 6 hours, Jason confirmed. From the moment the Keeper ship enters communication range to the moment the Devourer ships reach our engagement zone. That's not much time, Reeves observed. It's enough if we start the modifications now, Jason said. I've already done most of the preliminary work. With 4 people working together, we can complete the system reconfiguration in 4 hours. Marcus looked around the control room, seeing it with new eyes. This was where his teammates had died 3 years ago, fighting to activate a shield that would hide humanity from its enemies. Now they were talking about turning that same shield into a weapon that might finally let humanity fight back. There's one more thing, Marcus said quietly. If we do this, if we attack the Devourer ships, we're essentially declaring war on their entire species. Earth won't be hidden anymore, we'll be a known threat. Good, Jason said firmly. Let them know we're here. Let them know that humanity doesn't run from bullies. Morrison looked at Marcus. It's your call, Sergeant. You're the one with the experience. Marcus thought about Lieutenant Kim and the others who had died in this room. He thought about the photograph in his wallet and the names written in alien script on his arm. He thought about the choice between hiding and fighting, between surviving and living. We do both, he said finally. We receive the Keeper transmission to get the intelligence we need. Then we test Jason's WEP then. Earth loses its only chance to gain critical intelligence about our enemies. The general said simply. And we face the next Devourer incursion blind and unprepared.